Hello everyone, welcome to our audiobook channel. If you enjoy this story or want to hear more exciting content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your feedback helps us improve and bring even more captivating stories. Enjoy listening. Chapter 1, Escapee from Savage Island. In a remote jungle nestled between the Chu State and Whitewater City within the Daxian country, a thin and frail figure was leaning against a thick tree trunk. Both of his legs were spread apart in a relaxed manner. This figure belonged to a 13 or 14-year-old teenager. Aside from his unusually pale face, the boy had fairly common facial features. His clothes were loose-fitting and a bright shining steel sword was carelessly thrown by his side. The sword, although shiny, was also stained with spots of dried, black blood. A strip of cloth was wrapped around the teenager's shoulder, multiple times, forming a makeshift tourniquet. Even though it was tight, fresh blood still leaked out. Closing his eyes, the young man became motionless against the tree trunk, as if he was taking a nap. Suddenly, a slight shat sound came from within the jungle. Something was rapidly approaching the young man. The young man opened his eyes and jumped up, while his toe instinctively flicked to the side. Bang! The steel sword shot up and rested snugly within the young man's palm. The young man looked in the direction of the sound and without hesitation, leaped in the other direction. With just a few steps, he disappeared into the jungle. After a while, a group of black armored warriors appeared from the jungle brush, moving in a tight battle formation. There were only 20 warriors, but everyone in their group was tall and sturdy with looks that matched those of seasoned veterans. It was clear that they were soldiers who were used to bloodshed. They came out from one side of the jungle. After a low grunt from one of them, all 20 of them stopped and stood perfectly straight in the same spot. At the same time, one of the young warriors hastily stepped forward and squatted down in front of where the youth once rested. Using his hands, he quickly dug through the teen's resting place before soon standing up again. "General Wang, the fugitive has only recently fled. If we were to leave now, we might be able to catch him," the warrior reported to the only member within their group who was not wearing a black helmet and was instead showing off his bald head. While the warriors were relatively tall, compared to this 2-meter giant next to them, they were much shorter in comparison. They were like children standing in front of an adult. "Humph, there is no need to chase him. We've already secured the surrounding cities. No matter how cunning this brat is, he won't be able to escape. To that side, General Sidhu has already been waiting for a long time. Now, all we have to do is to slowly make our way over to him." The giant man snorted while staring in the direction the young man had escaped in. "Sir, this is a huge criminal that the state demands be apprehended. If we capture him, we will have accomplished something great. Are we really going to give our prize away to General Sidhu?" an armored warrior asked after a moment's hesitation. "Something great? No matter. Whether General Sidhu gets our prize or not will depend on if he has the capability required to capture the fugitive. Regardless, let us slow down a bit so that we might be able to catch them both." Tired, the giant man said without emotion while wiping his bald head. "Sir, what do you mean by that? General Sidhu has far more people than we do. Even if that young man knows a few skills, how will it be possible for him to stand against General Sidhu?" Astounded, the young soldier stared at his commanding officer. "Uxin, you've been by my side for quite some time now and I can tell that you are quite strong. However, if you were wanted by the government, what is the most you would be able to face and still be able to get away safely?" The gigantic man didn't answer the young soldier directly, instead he replied with a deep question. "If I were fighting general detectives, then I could handle about 7 or 8 of them without a problem. However, if they numbered over 10, I would start having problems." The young soldier wasn't sure where his superior was going with his question, but regardless he answered the question. 7 or 8. Ha! Ever since the arrest warrant for this kid was issued, the number of general detectives killed while trying to capture him has already surpassed that paltry amount by tenfold. The giant man roared with laughter, coldly explaining why he asked his original question. The general detectives have all been trained by specialists, though they cannot compare to us of the Black Tiger Guard. They definitely aren't as weak as the average person. The young soldier's face revealed a look of disbelief. He couldn't understand how this youngster could be that strong. This youth, he originally escaped from Savage Island, which in itself is no small feat. The island was originally designed to be a prison for the most diabolical of people. Each prisoner locked away there possesses great talent and power. Never should they be underestimated. The giant coldly stated. What? He escaped from Savage Island. The young soldier sucked in a breath and suddenly, another thought came to him. Hastily, he asked. Sir, I've heard that Savage Island sank overnight, and didn't they say that all of the prisoners sank with the island? The infamous Dead Sea surrounds it. A special ebony boat is required to traverse the waters. Nothing else is capable of staying afloat. I'm not too sure of that myself, but other than that young man, at least 10 others escaped from the Dead Sea. If it weren't for the fact that we accidentally found one of the escapees and interrogated him for information, I'm afraid that the courts would not have known about this at all. Consequently, the Black Tiger Guard would not have been sent to patrol this place either. No matter though, that young man we have to capture is the weakest criminal that escaped. Although he set up false trails and set us back half a month, all we need to do now is to head straight and we'll find him. And once we do, he's as good as dead. Shaking his head, the giant man slapped the back of his black spear. Of course, who doesn't know that Sir is ranked within the top 100 in the entire state? The young soldier praised the giant man as his respect for the tall soldier floated onto his face. Stop flattering me. We should get going. Waving his fan-like hand, the giant man rather bluntly commanded the soldiers to move out. Saluting, the young soldier returned to his spot among the others. Immediately the soldiers returned to their formation and each soldier quickly disappeared into the jungle. 1 cup of tea later, the soldiers left the jungle and entered a small but spacious meadow. The sight that greeted them left all of them stunned. The meadow, which originally had been lush green and had bloomed with plant life, was now dyed crimson red. In the middle of all the blood, the corpses of similarly dressed black armored soldiers were scattered across the ground. On each of their faces horrified expressions remained. It was as if they had seen a truly dreadful sight before they died. Each corpse had a thumb-sized hole in their throat with blood still pouring out. Altogether there are 30 corpses here, all of them under General Situ's command. It seems that not one was spared. However, General Situ's body is not among the corpses here. The young soldier named Uxin reported with a pale and disturbed face after he had quickly moved around the corpses and examined them. The giant man's face dropped as he heard the report. Glancing to the other side of the meadow, something caught his eye. He quickly made his way over. Without hesitation the other soldiers followed him, but they were on their guard and much more cautious than before. The giant man quickly thundered to the tree and after looking down, his face twisted in anger and grief. There, under the tree, was the withered body of a black armored soldier with a steel sword pierced through his throat, pinning him to the tree. Near the tree, a long but pale silver blade was stabbed into the ground. The rigid hands of the middle-aged man were grasping the sword's blade. Every single finger bore multiple cuts and his eyes stared straight ahead even though his breathing had ceased long ago. Liu Ming was quickly jumping through the jungle and his entire body felt sore. Even the spoils of his battle, another silver blade, began to feel heavier and heavier in his hand. Although he had trained himself in swordsmanship for 5 to 6 years and was able to kill all of the warriors who were waiting for him, the ferocity of the warriors was beyond his expectation. Even after he used a hit-and-run tactic to kill off all of the warriors, the leader of the warriors kept on pursuing him without fear for his own life. This forced him to use a secret technique he had learned on Savage Island, one that burned his potential and reopened his old wound. Even using that technique, he was still only barely able to kill that leader. Using such a technique overworked his adolescent body. He wouldn't last much longer at this rate. When Liu Ming thought about the after effects, he couldn't help but take a glance at his shoulder. The layered cloth strips wrapped around his shoulder were soaked with blood, and at the same time, waves of pain kept on pulsating from his arm. Even with his stubborn personality, enduring the burning after effects was simply too much. Black Tiger warriors deserved their title as De Xian's elites. They were far superior compared to the normal government detectives that had chased after him before. Him right now could only hope that the slaughter earlier made the other Black Tiger warriors wary of him, too scared to pursue him closely. Once 1 or 2 more days passed, the after effects of the air closure technique would wear off and he could jump into a nearby river to escape. Although Liu Ming wasn't very old, he had learned quite a few rare and non-mainstream techniques. If he hadn't, even with someone protecting him on Savage Island, he wouldn't have been able to survive there for 7 to 8 years as a child. As Liu Ming thought back, the scarred face of a man floated before his eyes. Even though his demeanor was quite ferocious, when Liu Ming remembered him, his heart felt warm. Suddenly, Liu Ming's face turned dark and his body, which had been speeding forward, twisted itself to shift to the left and curled into a ball during the process. At the same time, "Xiao Xiao" sounds rang out ahead of him. A dozen, half-foot-long crossbow bolts shot out in front of him. They came whizzing out of the jungle with a couple of flashes and barely passed by the young man. Instead they pierced into a gray-white tree behind him. The bolts were shining coldly under the sun. It was obvious that they were made of high-grade steel. Most of the bolts were stuck to the tree and were still quivering slightly. "Who is it?" the young man coldly called out as he tumbled into a nearby bush and pressed his silver blade out in front of him. "Pretty good. No wonder you were able to live for so long under the pursuit of Black Tiger warriors. However, now that you've met the two of us, prepare to die." A sharp feminine voice came from ahead and 2 shadows, one of a man and the other of a woman, flickered out from a tree ahead of the young man. Chapter 2, Desperate Teenager. Chapter 2, Desperate Teenager. The woman was big and stout and looked around 30 years old. She wore crimson-red clothes and a giant red flower situated in her hair. Her face was rough and ugly, and in her hand was a mace whose length was nearly the height of a grown man. The man next to her was around 40 years old and had an ordinary-looking face. He wore blue silk robes and a short sword hung around his waist in a yellow wooden sheath. In his hand was a 3-foot-long crossbow. It was not loaded since he had just fired it at Liu Ming as an opening attack. "You two are not from the Black Tiger Guards, right?" Liu Ming took a deep breath and asked, as he eyed the two people closely. After living on Savage Island for such a long period, he had learned a long time ago to probe his enemy for weaknesses before starting a fight. His question was both a probe as to how strong they were and a way to stall for time. In actuality, as soon as their gazes had met, Liu Ming's brain had already started working. The woman, with her thick arms and heavy footstep, is obviously a strength type. She is possibly a bit inferior in speed, but with that weapon in her hand, even the slightest contact cannot be allowed. The man has white and steady hands and a shady look. He most likely has some kind of special skill. Against him, full attention and caution is required. The other two naturally did not know that the weak-looking teenager would be thinking about so much information in such a short time. This was their first time facing such a young opponent and they could not help but reveal an expression of interest. The man grabbed a new bolt with one hand and reloaded his crossbow, that had multiple vents, while saying icily, "Liu Yangzong, from the Yang city in the south. 7 years ago, he deceived the king and was sent to the jail in Nanlan County. He later died of sickness in jail. His son, however, was given a chance to live due to his young age, although he would have to live out the rest of his life imprisoned on Savage Island. Yet, a month ago, Savage Island sunk to the bottom of the Dead Sea for reasons unknown. Most of the prisoners died in the waters. Despite that, only Liu Ming and 11 other people escaped from the Dead Sea. Now the Ministry of Justice has issued silver rank bounties for the escaped convicts, dead or alive. Am I right? The man's voice faded as the red woman next to him let out a sharp laugh. Little brat, this man died 7 days ago by our hands. Was he your comrade? She casually grabbed a leather bag from her waist and threw it on the ground. Doc. The bag flipped around and out rolled a bloody head. The head was covered by quite a bit of facial hair, making him look around the age of 40. The head had a coarse dark expression on it while its mouth hung limply open. Liu Ming glanced at the head and his heart instantly dropped. He whispered a name, Steelhead. So, I wasn't wrong. Looks like you do recognize him. Brat, if you quietly let us arrest you, the two of us can give you some leeway, and you might even survive after being judged. However, if you decide to make a move now, we will kill you without fail. The man dressed in blue said after he finished reloading his crossbow. The two of you already know so much about me, which means you two are probably from the Ministry of Justice. What level are you two? Using such empty promises to deceive me, are you lying to me because I'm young? The imperial law cannot be defied. With the number of Black Tiger guards I've killed, I'm afraid that even if the king himself was in my defense, I'd still be hacked into pieces. Liu Ming blinked his eyes and did not for a second believe the man in blue. The man snorted at this answer, neither denying nor confirming anything. The red woman to the side laughed and said, "It's unbelievable that this child is so young and still understands the imperial law so well. The people from Savage Island are extraordinary. Even if they are young, you cannot underestimate them. You are right that he, my husband, and I, the wife, serve the Ministry of Justice. Specifically, we're at the silver scale level. Little brother, when you die and reach the Huan Quan, don't blame us for bullying the weak. Husband, do it." When the ugly woman finished talking, her expression suddenly turned cold. She attacked. The swing of her mace fiercely whistled through the air as it sped toward the young man. Despite her large body, she was abnormally agile. Even though the mace in her hand was gigantic, she swung it as if it was weightless. With perfect coordination, the man in blue on the other side raised the giant crossbow and fired a dozen bolts, which shot forth like cold rays of light, toward Liu Ming's sides. Liu Ming grimaced. If he dodged to the left or right, he would be jumping straight in front of the crossbow bolts, but if he remained in the center, then he would have to face the attack of the ugly woman. Their coordination was flawless. It was no wonder that the two of them were husband and wife. As Liu Ming looked at the scene, his face changed. However, his mind continued to move. The next moment he took in a breath of air, and his hand tightly clutched onto his silver blade. His sword became a streak of light as he swung it at the ugly woman's head. Even when face to face with the giant mace, Liu Ming paid it no heed. It was basically trading fatal hits. The ugly woman's eyes narrowed. Although she knew that her foe was not trying to die together with her, she was not willing to actually risk her life. She was forced to change her stature and pull her mace back a bit in order to block the silver sword. Liu Ming's flicked his wrist and the silver sword retracted in a blur to prevent a collision with the mace. Then, he viciously swung the sword twice, once to the left and once to the right. Dang dang! 2 bolts that were swerving toward Liu Ming were instantly knocked away. Brat! From a distance, the man in blue could not bite back his curse when he saw his bolts stopped. Grasping something at his waist, he once again started to reload the crossbow. The special move he used earlier to secretly control the path of the bolts had dealt with countless strong enemies. He never would have guessed that it would be ineffective against this young man. The ugly woman was also surprised but quickly regained her focus. She furiously swung her mace and started to battle with the young man once more. Every time she swung the massive weapon, wind would rage around it. Her whole body grew huge in ferocity, as if transforming into a humanoid beast. Her strength was unstoppable. In contrast, Liu Ming's silver sword did not clash with the mace at all. It transformed into a ray of silver light as he circled around the ugly woman, trying to avoid most of the attacks. Although he was at a disadvantage, every attack of his was aimed at a vital spot of the ugly woman. Every attack forced her to slow down her offense in order to protect herself. Even though the woman's martial prowess was far above Liu Ming's, this situation caused her to yell out in frustration. Liu Ming did not care. He strengthened his resolve and continued to endlessly dance around the ugly woman. Looking at him right now, he almost seemed relaxed. However, in reality, he had once again used a secret technique to squeeze out the last bit of strength from his body. Otherwise, his weak body would have been blown away by the violent winds created by the mace alone, and he would have been unable to attack the woman. From afar, as the man in blue saw the situation at hand, his was shocked. He was fully aware of how powerful his wife was. Although they would often practice with each other, he would never dare fight her directly in such a straightforward manner. However, this boy who was still in his teens could actually accomplish such a thing. It was as if this boy started training martial arts while in his mother's womb. To his knowledge, some wealthy nobles would have their descendant train in body strengthening techniques from an early age. They would use various medicinal baths and have them ingest elixirs non-stop, but even the most intense training would never produce someone as strong as the young man in front of him right now. Fortunately, the young man was still young and his strength was obviously not enough. If another 3 or 4 years had passed, even if the husband and wife fought together as hard as they could, they wouldn't be able to safely get away. Of course, the young man would never have that chance now that they had found him. As the man in blue thought of this, his killing intent rose even more. He raised his crossbow with one hand and, with his other, took out his short sword from its wooden sheath. The short sword was gray and was almost weightless. It was made out of bone. With the slightest motion, the man stealthily rushed closer to the battlefield without a sound. It only took Liu Ming a glance to discern the man in blue's deceptive actions. His already tense heart sank deeper into despair. He could barely face one of them alone. If the two of them attacked together, his life would truly end here. Looks like he couldn't help but risk his life once more. Thinking to this point, his heart no longer had any hesitation. Against the giant mace, he actually stopped dodging. Raising his sword with his arm, he whispered, "Through the throat." Veins popped out on Liu Ming's arm and his arm suddenly grew by at least a full circle. The silver sword made some strange movements, transforming into a silver ray that directly pierced through the woman's throat. The speed of it was vastly higher than previously demonstrated. The woman was startled by the scene and tried to retract her mace to defend, but it was too late. Though she was in rage, her heart made a decision. She relaxed both her arms and threw her mace straight at the young man's chest. In her mind, if she tried to use deadly attacks, he would most likely retreat back to protect his life. However, the corner of Liu Ming's eyes only made a slight twitch and his movements did not change at all. He sucked in a large gulp of air, and twisted his waist so that his chest became unbelievably flat. Clang! The giant mace gouged into the young man's chest, leaving behind deep grooves that splattered blood out immediately. However, Liu Ming's expression did not change at all. It was as if the one that took such a heavy hit was not him. With a twist of his hands, the silver sword was pulled out from the hole in the woman's neck. The woman let out a scream as both of her hands were clutching her throat. Her fat body endlessly twitched on the ground. All of this happened lightning fast. The man in blue had just made it to the front lines when he saw everything clearly. He roared in shock and hefted his crossbow to fire 10 bolts. At the same time, the bone dagger in his hand immediately stabbed toward the empty area next to Liu Ming. As Liu Ming was about to deal another strike at the woman, his intuition warned him of great danger. Without thinking, he instantly turned his shoulder to the side. Blood flashed and an invisible sharp thing grazed past Liu Ming's face, cutting some of his hair that was flying around. Enchanted weapon, you are a practitioner. With a flip of his body, Liu Ming landed on his feet. As he gave a deeper look at the object in the man's hand, he couldn't help but cry out. From the dagger in the man's hand several abnormal rays came out, flashing with a faint white light. Chapter 3, Practitioner. Brat, you dare hurt my wife? You're definitely dead now. The man's face was somewhat twisted under the reflection of the bone sword in his hand. He quickly threw away the crossbow in his other hand. He then took out a red pill and shoved it into his mouth. Obviously that logic-defying attack wasn't something that he could easily perform. Seeing that, Liu Ming screamed, "Projectile incoming." He then threw a white blob toward the still twitching woman on the ground while he leaped back and scrambled into the jungle beside him. Seeing this, the man paused before he flew into a fit of rage. He couldn't leave the woman on the ground alone and thus had to shift sideways to use the bone sword to stab into the air in front the incoming projectile. With a hong, the white blob was hit by something invisible in mid-air and exploded. A glob of gray-white powder spread out and covered everything within a few meters. Seeing this, the blue-robed man became cautious and didn't dare let the powder touch him. He quickly held the bone sword in front of his chest while he pushed his other hand lightly away from him as he spoke two words, "Elemental Wall." With the words, the bone sword let out a faint light as an invisible air wave came from it and pushed away the surrounding powder. The man quickly knelt down and ran his finger across the powder-covered floor. He smelled what was on his finger and immediately stood up in a fit of rage. "It's only common flour. Brat, I will cut you into 1,000 pieces." The blue-robed man cursed a few more times before he ran over to check on the ugly woman. The woman was tightly holding onto her neck with both hands. Her breath had already slowed down, becoming indiscernible. There was no hope for her to recover. "Darling, rest easy. I am going to kill that brat and have him accompany you to the afterlife." The blue-robed man grit his teeth as he spoke. He then, once more, tightened his grip on the bone sword and stood up. He then yelled "Lighten" and ran in the direction that the young man ran off in. His movements changed and became much faster than before. He seemed just like a ghost flashing through a field. Although his body did not have much Yuanli, he was drawing support from the red pill that he had ingested earlier, allowing him to use 4 or 5 more spells for another quarter of an hour. This was more than enough to chase down and kill any normal person. Liu Ming was violently running through the jungle while his legs started feeling heavier and heavier. At the same, his chest was burning as the violent activity made blood flow profusely from his wound. The shoulder wound from before had completely reopened, leaving half of his body numb. Liu Ming had no intention of stopping to bind his wounds and kept running in a single direction. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as the dense shrubbery was replaced by a large field. At the end of the field was a huge river which roared with water flowing through. Seeing the river, Liu Ming felt a sense of happiness, but suddenly, his eyes darkened. He stumbled and almost fell down. With a sense of urgency, he quickly bit his tongue, causing a hint of blood to fill his mouth. Only then was he able to regain his senses and stop the fall. However, at that moment, the bitter voice of the blue-robed man came from the forest behind him. "Brat, where do you think you're going?" Right when the voice died down, the blue-robed man came out from behind a tree and quickly ran toward Liu Ming. Looking back, Liu Ming could see how fast the blue-robed man was moving and quickly threw his silver blade backward while he sprinted toward the river. The blue-robed man flicked his bone sword and deflected the incoming silver blade. He didn't so much as pause from parrying the sword. With one running and the other chasing, the two ran for a dozen meters. After another few leaps, Liu Ming finally got to the side of the river. Making a huge jump, he was about to land right into the river. The blue-robed man had only a few meters left before he would catch up to Liu Ming when he noticed his actions. He knew that he wouldn't make it before Liu Ming sank into the river. Thus, he used all of his Yuanli and pushed it all into his bone sword. Instantly, the bone sword shined so bright that it hurt to look straight at. The man lowly roared and slashed forward, causing an almost invisible sword projection to jump out of the sword. In the blink of an eye, it strangely appeared right behind Liu Ming and plunged into him. Pu. Liu Ming was pierced through the stomach and dropped heavily into the river. After falling into the river, he disappeared under a white wave. Only then did the blue-robed man get to the side of the river. Seeing the raging waves, he furrowed his brow. He believed that with the combination of his bone sword's attack and the ferocity of the river, Liu Ming would have no chance of survival. However, he couldn't be sure without seeing the corpse. Although, he didn't know how to swim, and this river's power was enough to run the corpse to a far, distant place. The man thought about it for a while and looked at the bone sword in his hand. The weapon, called a practitioner weapon, no longer had the bright shine it generated before and had returned back to its original state. The blue-robed man lingered for a moment, but could only leave in frustration when Liu Ming's body didn't float back up. 3 days later, on a river along the border between Chu State and Fenyun State stood 2 men in yellow robes. One was tall and the other short, and they were blankly staring at a well-dressed corpse. Beside the corpse in front of the two, there were 7 or 8 more corpses that all had gray jumpsuits. However, unlike the well-dressed corpse, these corpses all had horrible wounds. The wounds varied from being cut in half to having their heads bashed in. What do we do? Since young master died so easily, what do we say to our clan head? The speaker was the short and skinny man who had a sword behind his back. His face was quite narrow and his eyes were triangular, giving off the impression of being quite deadly. However, his face was full of worry as he asked his companion. "Gu Lao-san, if you ask me, who do I ask? Who knew that this young master was so stupid? To actually let a thief get close to him and cut his throat when he's a beginning practitioner. Even though we have quite a few spirit medicines that the clan head gave us, even with them, he still wouldn't have a chance of surviving." The tall companion with a square face said. His face was full of frustration. "Guan Lauda, no matter how stupid he is still the clan head's adopted son. In addition, the clan head paid a huge price to get him a place in the ceremony. Now that he died halfway there, what are we going to tell the clan head? I fear that us getting beat is inevitable." Gu Lao-san sighed as a vague sense of fear appeared on his face. "HMPF. If getting beat is enough punishment for this, I will be burning incense." Guan Laoda's face muscles shuddered as he uttered a sentence that Gu Lao-san did not expect. "Guan Laoda, what do you mean by that? You and I are true middle-tier practitioners. Even if the clan head dearly loved his adopted son, do not tell me that we really have to repay this with our lives." Gu Lao-san looked at his fat companion with eyes wide open. "You think this youngster's identity is simply the adopted son of the head? Although this young master has a spiritual pulse, his attitude is horrible and he's quite brutal. He has almost no chance to approach the clan head. Why do you think such a person would at all be adopted by our clan head? Let me tell you that this young master is the clan head's illegitimate child, born from a mistress. The adopted son is just an excuse for this kid to become the clan head's son." Guan Laoda sneered as Gu Lao-san stared dumbstruck at him. "What? Young master is really the clan head's own flesh and blood? Guan Laoda, how do you know such a crucial thing?" The thin person shuddered as he stuttered out some words. "Whatever, I guess there is no reason to hide it from you now. You know that my relationship with the clan head's wife's personal maid was pretty good. She once complained about the clan head's injustices to me, and with a slip of her tongue, she told me the secret. This cannot be fake." Guan Laoda sighed. "So it is like that. The barbarian ghost sect is ranked quite low among the larger sects in Daxian country, and the opening spirit ceremony is quite expensive. Which caused me to wonder why our Bai clan would let someone, who isn't closely related to the clan, take that spot. If the kid actually had his spiritual pulse opened, he would be a true spiritual student and become much, much more powerful than either of us. If he gets some special chance and becomes a spirit master, and if the current emperor sees him, then the emperor would have to greet him with plenty of respect. Finally, Gu Laosan realized the inside story. It is not easy to become a spiritual student. Not only do you have to have a spiritual pulse, you cannot be older than 15 when you participate in the opening spirit ceremony. Every year, only a handful of participants pass the ceremony and a majority of them die during the ceremony. Even if one luckily survives, one has to work under the sect as a normal practitioner for 20 years. Head's decision to send his son this time was probably a bet. Even though Bai clan has quite a few spiritual pulse members, most of them have failed in the opening spirit ceremony. Those that survived are stuck in the sect and are being used as raw labor. Only Lady Yan had a successful spiritual opening and became a spiritual student of the Sky Moon sect. Unfortunately, Lady Yan is a girl and will one day marry someone. Head definitely wants his own son to become a spiritual student so that the Bai clan can keep its practitioner clan status for another few dozen years. Guan Laoda explained even more. Looks like clan head put great hope in this young master. However, the more hope put into the young master, the larger the chance is that we will die when we go back. How about we escape from the Xian country and never return to the Bai clan? With our statuses as middle-tier practitioners, we'd be respected everywhere. Gu Laosan said through closed teeth as his eyes quickly rolled. Chapter 4, Bai Clan. Chapter 4, Bai Clan. Ha! Leave the Xian country? You really think that the heart-nourishing pill given to us by the clan head was spiritual medicine? Think about what happened to the people who previously betrayed the Bai clan. In addition, our families are both still living within the Bai clan. If we leave now, how are they going to live? If I remember correctly, you married a beautiful lady last year and she became pregnant earlier this year. According to Dr. Zhang, there's an 80% chance that it will be a boy. Guan Laoda spoke loudly, but his expression was grave. This, hearing what he said, caused Gu Laosan to feel as if cold water had been poured onto his head. He stood motionless without saying a word. If it truly does not work, I do have a desperate plan. Though our chances to live do not exceed 20%. This plan will also use up all the savings we've stockpiled through the years. Guan Laoda's eyes flashed for a bit before he spoke. Use up all our savings and still only have a 20% chance to survive. Hearing this, Gu Laosan's face became bitter. Humph. If I did not have some relationship to the clan head's main wife, even this small chance would not be there. If you are unwilling, I will not force you. Guan Laoda calmly replied. You misunderstand, Guan Laoda. How could I possibly refuse? If it can preserve our lives, using all of our wealth is not a big deal. Gu Laosan quickly said in shock and apologetically smiled. If you understand, then great. Let's not waste any time. Before news gets back to the clan we need to sneak back in order to quickly prepare. Guan Laoda's expression relaxed a bit. This time, Gu Laosan only nodded his head, not daring to show any unwanted expressions. The two of them discussed the plan a little more in front of the new grave. From his chest, Guan Laoda pulled out a pair of green gloves, made of unknown material, and shouted. From the pair of green gloves, a layer of bright, white light rushed toward the ground in front of him. Boom! Soil and countless wild grasses flew in different directions as a 3-foot-deep pit appeared in front of the two. Gu Laosan circled around the pit before he kicked the corpses into it. When he walked over to the young man's corpse, he hesitated a bit before he reached behind his back and pulled his sword out of its sheath. With a swipe of his finger over the sword, a green light scattered from its surface. With a twist of Gu Laosan's wrist, he prepared to use his sword to do something to the corpse. Although, Guan Laoda was simply watching from the side, his ears twitched and his expression changed. He then turned toward the river and yelled, "Who is it? Who dares to sneak around and eavesdrop on us?" As soon as he finished talking, Guan Laoda moved his arm. On his fist, a light shone and a frightening air mass flew out. A muffled noise. About 100 feet away, the underbrush started to violently shake. A weak figure crawled out, before he lay down on the ground motionlessly. Guan Laoda saw this and walked over. With a kick, he flipped over the weak-looking figure to make him face up. Surprisingly, it was a young man with his eyes shut. His clothes were in tatters and he was completely unconscious. Could it be he came from the river? Looks like I do not even have to do anything and he still won't live for much longer. Guan Laoda gave the young man another glance and relaxed after confirming that there was no threat. Still, hurry up and finish him off. What we just said cannot be leaked out. Hearing Guan Laoda, Gu Laosan relaxed a bit beside the hole. Without hesitation he still called for a murderous act. You do not need to tell me that, I know. This kid's appearance, Guan Laoda was slightly annoyed at Gu Laosan and the gloves on his fists started to shine once more. However, just as the light swept across the young man's face, he became shocked. What's happening? What's wrong with his appearance? As Gu Laosan saw Guan Laoda lower his glove, Gu Laosan naturally became curious. If you come over here you will know. Guan Laoda pulled back his fist and waved Gu Laosan over with a strange expression. Seeing that, Gu Laosan's curiosity grew. He did not think much as he sheathed the sword in his hand and walked over to Guan Laoda. Who is this kid and why does he look exactly like the young master? After the thin man saw the young man's appearance, he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. It's somewhat close, but his face is somewhat pale. His brows are also much thicker and he has many scars on his face. In addition, his skin is somewhat rough and much different from the young master's smooth skin from never having to work hard. Guan Laoda took a breath and closely observed before coming to a conclusion. There are a lot of people that have similar appearances in this world. It isn't too weird to meet someone that has an appearance similar to the young master. It doesn't matter how similar this kid looked to the young master, since the young master had a spiritual pulse and was going to be a practitioner like you and me. Gu Laosan also calmed down and carefully analyzed the situation. However, if this kid has a spiritual pulse, I have a better plan for preserving our lives. However, I do not think that there's such a coincidence in this world. Practitioner clans borrow the power of their blood relations in order to give birth to children with spiritual pulses. For normal people it is a 1 in 1,000 chance that they will have a spiritual pulse. If a normal person knows that they have a spiritual pulse, without enough resources or a method of training they cannot possibly become practitioners. Remember us? As soon as we realized that we had spiritual pulses, we decided to join the Bai clan, so we could get to the height we are at today. Guan Laoda was still lamenting over his future as he said that. That's right. Those that have been sent to the ceremony were the best of the best in the practitioner clans. Now that I think about it, we have no chance to beat those who are born into the Bai clan. Gu Laosan didn't think much as he responded. Nothing we say helps right now. Let's first try our best to keep our lives. Seeing that this kid is quite young, I will leave him with an intact body. Guan Laoda didn't say much more and tensed his arm up. On the tip of his hand were nearly invisible green sparkles. Naturally, Gu Laosan had no objections to the killing of this kid. With a shake of his arm, Guan Laoda's greenish fist landed silently on the young man's dantian. Even though the attack seemed extremely weak, Guan Laoda had used the power of his practitioner weapon. Therefore, the power within the strike was enough to shatter the kid's internal organs and thus would take his life within seconds. As soon as Gu Laosan saw the green light on Guan Laoda's fists, he turned around and was about to manage his young master's corpse. However, right then, a surprised yelp came from behind him. No way, this kid has Yuanli. He has a spiritual pulse. Guan Laoda's voice was shaking quite a bit as he called out. Hearing him, Gu Laosan quickly looked back. He saw Guan Laoda holding his fist while the green light on his fist had completely disappeared. However, On the young man's stomach, a ring of near-invisible white light was silently pulsating and looked as if it was about to die out at any moment. Yuanli protection. This kid definitely has a spiritual pulse and probably has quite a decent Yuanli foundation too. Gu Lao-san was quite stunned. Haha, this time, it's a true miracle. Gu Lao-san, we do not need to go back to Bai clan anymore. With this kid, we can live our lives without worry. Guan Laoda stared blankly at the kid who was still in a coma before he started to laugh freely. A hint of insanity was visible on his face. Guan Laoda, what do you mean? Why does this kid having a spiritual pulse save our lives? Gu Lao-san blinked his eyes and was still quite confused. Why does the clan head want to kill us? Guan Laoda stopped laughing and asked back. Because the young master died while we were supposed to protect him. Gu Lao-san looked even more confused. He, but is the young master not right here? Guan Laoda said and pointed at the kid in front of him while sneering. What, you're going to? Gu Lao-san wasn't stupid and immediately realized the intentions of Guan Laoda. However, his face became much paler than before. Correct. We will be taking this kid to the barbarian ghost sect and leave him with the person in charge of collecting those that will be undertaking the ceremony. Afterward, we can go back to Bai clan and say that we already sent the person there. Once head receives a mail which says that the young master was actually sent to the sect, we will not be punished and we might even be rewarded. Guan Laoda was extremely calm as he spoke those words. That does work, but this kid doesn't look too much like the young master. What would happen if he gets exposed? In addition, we do not even know where he is from. How do we know he would agree to this? Gu Lao-san's face darkened as he thought about the possibilities of failure. What are you afraid of? Once this kid gets into the barbarian ghost sect, it will be a couple of years before the Bai clan sees him again. In addition, seeing how dangerous the opening spirit ceremony is, this kid does not even have a chance of survival since he has never gone through any of the preparatory training. If he dies, we are basically free and without worry. As for his appearance, did you forget what you did before you became a practitioner? He does not have to look perfectly like the young master, just being similar is enough. The sect only has a picture of the young master from a year ago. Having some sort of change is a normal thing. Guan Laoda said with confidence. What if he really does complete the opening spirit ceremony and becomes a spiritual apostle, what should we do then? Gu Lao-san was still hesitant. Become a spiritual apostle? Are you still asleep? In the past years, only a few disciples have become spiritual apostles. As soon as we get back, we will try to get rid of the poison the clan head gave us and try to leave the clan together with our families. Even if that kid does not die and does something, what does that have to do with us? As long as we can save our lives now, everything else can be discussed at a later time. As for convincing this kid, we will do this. Guan Laoda leaned closer to Gu Lao-san and whispered indistinguishable words to him. Chapter 5, Waking Up. What you said does indeed make sense. Well, we will do as you say. After we have dealt with the present disaster, I will leave the Bai clan with you. With a flash of his eyes, Gu Lao-san firmed his resolve. Haha, that's the spirit. You and I have known each other for many years. If I had no confidence, how am I supposed to complete the task? You go ahead and deal with the body of the young master, but remember to leave behind his clothes and equipment. I will go ahead and save this kid. By the looks of things, if I don't hurry up he really will kick the bucket. This is going to cost me a lot of yuan qi. Guan Laoda patted Gu Lao-san on his shoulder with a smile. Gu Lao-san nodded, and strode toward the pit. Guan Laoda dealt with the kid's clothes with a few swift motions, immediately exposing the vicious wounds all over his body, along with numerous other scars. Even for someone who had seen as many things as Guan Laoda, he couldn't help but gasp in shock. However, his hands unhesitatingly flew toward the youth's wounds and started to pat the areas around them. At first sporadically, then he furiously increased his intensity until the beatings sounded like the firing of firecrackers. The youth's body turned bright red and his body, which had swelled up because of water, reverted back to normal. All of a sudden Guan Laoda stopped his actions midway. He reached into his robes and pulled out a yellow wooden case. After gently patting the box with a few fingers, the lid automatically popped open with a pong. Once it opened, it revealed several extremely fine-tipped, silver needles of varying sizes. With just 2 fingers, he reached into the case, and with a mere touch, he pulled out a single silver needle with a well-practiced motion. Carrying an intense expression, Guan Laoda moved his arm. It instantly became a blur as he swiftly jabbed several points on the youth's body. Liu Ming had no idea when he came out of the river, but he now found that his head felt unbearably painful. It was like it was being split open while every inch of his body felt unnaturally burning hot. However, a cool sensation swept across his entire body while he wasn't paying attention, bringing him such relief that he nearly cried out loud. At the same time, he felt an immense wave of sleepiness descend upon him and, unknowingly, fell into a deep sleep. As he slept like a baby, numerous scenes flashed through his consciousness one after another. One of which depicted the shadows of a middle-aged couple whose faces were unclear, yet there were a bunch of weird demonic faces as well. They surrounded him and incessantly spoke to him in a language he couldn't understand. The couple gave him a sense of familiarity. The youth tried his best to listen to what was being said, but it was clearly an impossible task given the other disturbances around him. In his desperation he tried to push the demons away, but found himself without an ounce of strength. His heart became heavy as his emotions boiled. He had no idea how long he remained in this state, but after a while, Liu Ming gradually woke up. He could feel a ball of warmth flowing through and around his body. The moment he opened his eyes, he found himself face to face with a square-faced, middle-aged man. The man, upon seeing Liu Ming awaken, immediately barked at him. "Don't think of anything, hurry up and train. If you don't, all the effort from earlier will be wasted." As Liu Ming heard this, he felt a chill run through his body, and without thinking too much, mentally brought out a familiar breathing technique. He then began to direct this warm flow to different parts of his body. It was at this moment that Guan Laoda released the breath he was holding and withdrew the hand he had placed on the kid's chest. He then stood up and observed Liu Ming's actions with a detached gaze. After a while, the youth's pale pallor finally started to gain some color. Opening his eyes, he looked at Guan Laoda. "Many thanks to Elder for your merciful rescue. If not, this kid would have been dead by now." Liu Ming stood up and respectfully bowed while he spoke. He had no idea who this person standing in front of him was, but he had rescued him. And, it was natural that he would feel extremely grateful toward his benefactor. At this point he looked around, trying to get a better idea of his surroundings, and found himself in a pit not too far from the river. He had also been dressed in brand new clothes and his wounds had all been bandaged. The slightly cool sensations coming from the wounds told him that they had evidently used extremely high-quality medicine on him. As for the side effects from the skills that he had used a while back, the thing that he was most worried about was the internal injuries. They should have burst open long ago, but instead they had all been well suppressed with help from the other party. However, no matter how skilled this stranger was, the disastrous condition of his body was simply too devastating. It was only a matter of time before his injuries would begin to act up again. While he was on Savage Island, he had learned some forbidden techniques from the prisoners there. Those techniques were extremely effective against enemies, but the price paid for using them was extremely high as well. It was basically a double-edged sword. If it wasn't for the teachings of Uncle Qian, who taught him a set of breathing techniques that allowed his recovery to far surpass that of an ordinary human being, he would never even have considered using these secret techniques so casually. The fact that he did not die from his injuries when he fell into the river was largely due to the effectiveness of this nameless breathing technique. Seeing the composure of this youth, Guan Laoda was slightly taken aback but still presented a smile as he replied. It's nothing, saving you was just a little thing. Ah, you do not seem to be alone. Liu Ming said unexpectedly. I have a partner who went to settle some other stuff, but he will be back soon. By the looks of things, you have not eaten in a number of days. Eat up first, then we will talk about other things. Guan Laoda said with a hearty smile. Guan Laoda walked a few steps away and bent over, pulling out a package wrapped in a flowery cloth from some unknown place. Upon opening it, it was revealed that it was full of all kinds of delicious snacks, which he brought and placed in front of the youth. Indeed, Liu Ming had been starving for a long time. With a word of thanks he took the package and started to stuff his face ravenously. In a flash, he devoured 7 or 8 pastries of varying sizes, upon which he slowed down his eating speed. There is no need to rush, young one, if there is not enough I still have more with me. Alright, may I have the pleasure of knowing your name? Why were you in such a place and with such ridiculously heavy injuries? Guan Laoda asked as he laughed. I am a merchant, my name is Yang Yuan. Originally I was transporting a shipment of extremely valuable cargo with my uncle, ready to do business somewhere else. Unfortunately we met a group of bandits on the way. I escaped into the river while I have no idea if my uncle managed to survive or not. Liu Ming gave a fake name as he sighed with a sorrowful expression. While he was on Savage Island, Liu Ming had learned a technique to manipulate his emotions and control his facial muscles from a well-known fraud. It was a simple matter for him to produce such an expression. Now that he was a wanted fugitive, carelessly giving out his real name would bring him no end of trouble. Ah, brother Yang, it was such misfortune for you to encounter bandits. Indeed, in recent times the world is in turmoil. To think that these bandits would have the nerve to commit these crimes in broad daylight, they really have no fear. When we return I will get the head to report it to the officials and put out several wanted posters, making sure that this band of bandits will definitely be arrested. Guan Laoda expressed his fury upon hearing about the bandits and inadvertently revealed his true feelings. If not for bandits killing the young master they were escorting, the pair would never have fallen into such dire circumstances. If that is true, my uncle's spirit in heaven will definitely thank you. Liu Ming replied with a somber expression. This is a small issue, do not worry about it. However, from your injuries, it looks as though you have experienced a fierce battle and even used abilities that burned your own potential. If not, then the healing process would not have been so troublesome. Guan Laoda asked while looking troubled. My uncle and I both learned a handful of fighting skills and were schooled in some secret techniques. We engaged the bandits in a fierce, all-out battle. Due to their overwhelming numbers I only had one escape route, which was the river. Liu Ming replied without too much thought. Brother Yang, you are too humble. You have a spiritual pulse within your body, and are clearly a well-trained practitioner of some caliber. How can it be that you only know a handful of techniques? To be able to force you into the river, they cannot be any ordinary bandits. Guan Laoda replied while laughing at Liu Ming's reply. Spiritual pulse? What is that? I have heard people speak of practitioners before, Liu Ming replied truthfully. Could it be that you do not know that practitioners are people that have a spiritual pulse? And even then they are ranked the lowest among spiritual pulse wielders? If you really were unaware, where could you possibly have learned the method of training your spirit? Even more so, how did you get such a decent-sized Yuanli? Guan Laoda looked at the youth through squinted eyes. I honestly do not know what Yuanli is, but when I was young, I found a nameless breathing technique which had the effect of strengthening my body. I have been practicing it all these years. Perhaps this might be the Yuanli training technique Uncle Guan speaks of. Liu Ming's eyes lit up as realization dawned upon him. So it was like that, that is indeed a possibility. Although, the methods to train Yuanli have always been controlled by the practitioner families, there are still some low-profile techniques that exist. It's such a pity, If only you knew a few more skills that practitioners use and had a practitioner weapon by your side, then a band of bandits would never have been a match for you. Guan Lao said as he shook his head, evidently not intending to pursue the matter any further. Does this mean that the technique Elder used to heal me was one based on the use of Yuanli? Conversely, this also means that Elder is a practitioner. Liu Ming exclaimed while looking peaceful even though his heart was in turmoil. While in the midst of escaping, he unexpectedly ran into practitioners. And now, yet another one appeared before his eyes. This was definitely a rare accident. While he was on the savage island, he had heard numerous rumors regarding practitioners from the mouths of the other prisoners. From what he heard, these practitioners were a rarity within Dexian country. Normal people would have extremely little contact with them and they all possessed unbelievable abilities. They could move light-footed through the air or they could take control of the air itself and use it to injure people. Even more incredible feats included being able to wield super strength, invulnerable to sword and spear attacks, even being immune to drowning or burning. These feats made it so that one man could be the equivalent of 1,000 men. The only way to recognize them was when they released their power. They would often be holding something known as a practitioner weapon, which upon activation would give off all kinds of light. Of course, some of the prisoners spoke of the stronger practitioners who could utilize their full power without a practitioner weapon. Therefore, when Liu Ming first saw that blue-robed man use his practitioner weapon, he immediately turned tail and ran for his life. If not, he might have lost his life to some bizarre attack. Of course, now that he was told that he himself possessed a spiritual pulse and could be considered a practitioner, he couldn't help but be taken aback. In an instant, the unknown breathing technique Uncle Qian taught him was immediately brought to mind. Chapter 6, Practitioner Weapon. Heh, I am indeed a middle-tier practitioner. If not, how could I have detected your spiritual pulse with just a glance? Guan Lao smiled as he replied and naturally didn't bring up his original intention to kill the youth. I had no idea that I could be considered a practitioner. Liu Ming murmured, as he came to some sort of understanding. Did you know that a practitioner is one of the lowest levels of spiritual pulse wielders? With your age, if you are able to access your spirit sea, you may be able to find a sect and become a spirit apostle. Guan Lao showed a strange expression as he said this. Apostle? Sect? Liu Ming furrowed his eyebrows at these two unfamiliar terms. Guan Lao chuckled, but just as he was about to explain, there was a disturbance in the distant grass patch. A skinny figure, carrying a big bag, walked toward them. Brother Gu, come over here, let me introduce you to Brother Yang. Without the guidance of a qualified practitioner, he managed to train his Yuanli on his own. Guan Lao waved to Gu Lao San the moment he appeared and said this with a profound meaning. That's great news, Gu Lao San said as he walked across, smiling at this luck. My greetings to Uncle Gu. Liu Ming said without hesitation as he immediately stood up to give a small bow. Ahaha, little brother, you do not need to be so courteous. Big brother Guan, I bought everything I needed. You know, anyone else would have taken at least half a day more. Gu Lao San boasted as he tossed the bag to Guan Lao Da. Of course I know that is why I asked you to personally make the trip. Right, this is not the place to be chit-chatting. Let us find somewhere less conspicuous, Guan Lao Da said while nodding his head. Liu Ming and Gu Lao San had no objections. After packing up they walked away from the river. While they were passing by a mound of freshly packed earth, Liu Ming casually glanced over it. Normal people would not be able to notice anything out of the ordinary, but Liu Ming could smell the odor of fresh blood. Though it was weak, it was not able to escape the notice of one who had been through as many bloody struggles as he had. Liu Ming felt his heart skip a beat, knowing that whatever was buried there definitely had something to do with the two other men. While they were by no means saints, beneath their guise of friendliness was definitely some hidden agenda. After an hour, the sky began to darken. Thus, the three of them took refuge in an abandoned shrine and started a fire to keep warm. Gu Laosan gutted a rabbit he had killed during the journey and began roasting it over the open flame. As the three men huddled around the fire, an irresistible smell soon wafted into the air. Those commonly referred to as practitioners are spiritual pulse users who have successfully undergone their spirit awakening and have access to their spirit sea. Once a spiritual pulse user passes their 15th birthday, their spiritual pulse will begin to solidify. From then on they will no longer have any chances to access their spirit sea, therefore, there is a very strict age limit regarding the awakening process. Those who have their spirit sea opened will be able to convert Yuanli to folly, which they can then use it to wield totems and perform spells. Those people are like gods to us. Sects are places where spirit apostles are trained, and normal people do not even know about these sects. Some extremely powerful sects even have the power to determine the fate of a country with just a mere word. Guan Laoda seemed to almost have forgotten about the rabbit roasting in front of him, revealing the existence of a secret and mystical world to Liu Ming. They can decide who is in charge of the government. The emperor has a personal army, how could he accept such a thing? Liu Ming couldn't help but ask as he took in a deep breath. This is all determined by power. Us mere practitioners cannot possibly compare to those spirit apostles. No matter how hard a practitioner trains, when faced against an army the most he can do is kill a few people. In the end, the only option is death. As for spirit apostles and spirit masters, they wield the incomparably powerful forces of nature within their palms and have the ability to summon demons and familiars. Not to mention their ability to fly through the sky or burrow through the earth. Regardless of the number of troops, no matter how many armies are gathered, they will still not be enough to even tire them out. In any case, members of the imperial household and high-ranking officials who have been marked by the sects can only resign themselves to their fate and simply wait to die. Gu Laosan chuckled while explaining. However, if one wishes to become an apostle, one must first undergo an opening spirit ceremony. Every awakening consumes an immense number of spirit ingredients that the sects have painstakingly procured over the course of many years. As such, apart from spiritual pulse apprentices the sect has personally raised, ordinary practitioners who wish to join the sect must first fork over a horrifyingly large sum of resources. In addition, a sect in the kingdom of Dexian is about to perform their opening spirit ceremony very soon. So that's how it is. Liu Ming exclaimed as a glint flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything more. Gu Laosan saw this, and couldn't leave it alone, so he suddenly remarked in an enticing manner, "Young brother, do you not wish to become part of a sect? Once you become a spirit apostle, not only will you attain unbelievable power, but your life force will increase tremendously as well. Enough for you to easily live to be 200 years old. In the first place, I am merely a commoner and only now have I learned that I have always had the capability to become a practitioner. I could not possibly dream of such an impossible thing. Furthermore, I have never believed in having anything handed to me on a silver platter anyway." The youth unexpectedly rejected Gu Laosan's proposal. This reaction left Gu Laosan momentarily lost for words. Upon seeing his companion's flustered reaction, Guan Laoda glared at him fiercely. After sighing deeply, he faced the youth and said, "Young brother, you have probably noticed as well. Well, I won't deceive you any more. Indeed, while the two of us had ulterior motives for rescuing you, this however is also an unbelievable opportunity for you. Once you pass it over, you will most likely regret it for the rest of your life. Would you just hear me out? Since both uncles have said so, I will listen to what you have to say." Liu Ming's expression did not change as he agreed with hesitation. "Well, here's the deal. The two of us are simply henchmen for the Bai clan. This time we received the order to send a young master to take part in the opening spirit ceremony hosted by the barbarian ghost sect." Guan Laoda was no fool either and knew that Liu Ming already harbored some suspicions toward them. Thus, he no longer had any intention of hiding the impending crisis that was about to befall the two of them, and completely spilled the beans in front of Liu Ming. There was no other choice, and thus we wish to use you to replace the young master to take part in the opening spirit ceremony. If you were to go, not only would the two of us escape this life-threatening predicament, this would also represent a great opportunity for you. This is the kind of opportunity that wouldn't present itself no matter how much the other members of the Bai clan begged for it. My guess is that the source of your troubles also isn't as simple as just meeting a bunch of bandits, but once you become an spirit apostle of the sect, there is nothing in the world of mortals that you cannot solve. Guan Laoda said with a heavy heart. There was a slight change in Liu Ming's expression as he listened up to this point. This opening spirit ceremony should be very dangerous, shouldn't it? What would happen if I do not successfully complete it? In order to achieve great power, one must also experience a certain degree of danger, but I am sure that it will be no problem for our young brother here. Even if you do not pass, that is a small matter, and you simply have to stay with the sect for a few years and perform services. Guan Laoda replied easily with a straight face. Liu Ming slightly furrowed his brows. He knew that Guan Laoda definitely wasn't telling him the whole truth, but he also knew that it wouldn't come out no matter how much he asked. More importantly, he did feel somewhat interested in the opening spirit ceremony itself. After spending such a long time on Savage Island, Liu Ming had learned early on that as long as one wielded enough power, one would be free to do as one liked. All the numerous desires he had buried deep in his heart for all this time clawed at him to become extremely strong in order to fulfill them. In any case, if he disagreed, it seemed like the two practitioners in front of him would not let him go so easily. Furthermore, should he decide to be uncooperative after they had divulged such sensitive information, it would seem likely that only the word death would be enough for them to safely protect their secret. After contemplating in his heart for a long time, Liu Ming finally came to a decision. All right, I agree. However, let me just make it clear. This situation will definitely be extremely dangerous, and after I help you this once, I will consider my debt for being rescued as having been paid in full. Furthermore, in order to bring me to the barbarian ghost sect, I wish for the two of you uncles to promise me two things. If you are willing to replace the young master and take part in the opening spirit ceremony, no matter how many conditions you throw at us, we will agree to them all. Gu Laosan proclaimed excitedly upon hearing Liu Ming's words. After some consideration, Guan Laoda also nodded his head. Both uncles know that even though my body has Yuanli, I have no knowledge of any of the practitioner techniques. Thus, I hope during the course of this journey, you guys will pass some skills onto me that will help me preserve my life. The other condition is that I wish to obtain this young master's practitioner weapon. Being a young master, the practitioner weapon he used shouldn't be too shabby, and thus in the event I encounter any problems within the barbarian ghost sect, I should still be able to deal with it to some degree. Liu Ming laid out his demands without reservation. The first condition is a good one. Even if you had not mentioned it, it was a given that we would have done so anyway. As for the second condition, that practitioner weapon contains immense power, and I fear that it may not be easy for a beginner, such as yourself, to wield. Gu Laosan mentioned with some hesitation. Even still, I would like to at least give it a shot, Liu Ming replied, with no intention of backing down. This. All right, we will give you the practitioner weapon. Guan Laoda grit his teeth and agreed to this demand. Gu Laosan displayed some reluctance upon hearing his words, but in the end, raised no objections. Right then, from now on I will do my best to accommodate the request. However, I still do not know what the previous young master was called. I will need to use his name from now on after all. Liu Ming said as he nodded his head. Young master was named by Kong Tian. Here, younger brother, you should take his possessions. Gu Laosan opened the massive bag behind his back with a slight movement of his hand and pulled out a small white parcel. Liu Ming immediately opened the parcel upon receiving it and took a look inside. Inside it were a number of clean clothes, along with a few small accessories, but most prominent of all the objects was a small bracelet. The bronze bracelet was fashioned in an ancient style and had rows and rows of silver flower patterns imprinted on the front. It gave one the impression that it was abnormally heavy for its appearance. Chapter 7, Yuanli Manipulation. Liu Ming couldn't help but pick up the bronze bracelet with an astonished expression on his face. This bronze bracelet was as light as the wind, as if it was weightless. "Is this young Master Bai's practitioner weapon?" Liu Ming asked after he had carefully inspected the bracelet in his hand. "That's right. The Tiger's Bite bracelet is a rarely seen, upper-tier practitioner weapon in both its offensive and defensive capabilities. It can be ranked among the top 10 practitioner weapons within the Bai clan." Gu Laosan explained while he looked at the bracelet with an air of reluctance. "However, before young brother can activate it, I fear that you must first learn the most basic skill of controlling your Yuanli. As for these techniques, we will teach them to you as we continue on our journey. We will definitely help you activate the bracelet as quickly as possible." Guan Laoda added. "Then I give my sincere thanks to both uncles," Liu Ming said with a hint of joy in his eyes as he placed the bracelet onto his right wrist and felt a cooling sensation emanating from it. "Very good, but your current appearance is still slightly imperfect and needs to be adjusted so that the apostles of the sect won't see through our ruse." Guan Laoda was nodding his head as he observed Liu Ming's face. "Adjusted, in what manner?" Liu Ming frowned as he heard this. Even though Liu Ming had an average appearance, he was still unwilling to let others change his appearance by any large degree. "Ah, relax young brother. We will definitely not damage your original appearance, we only need to make some slight adjustments to your hair and skin tone. Gu Laosan is an expert in this area so you can leave it to him." Guan Laoda immediately saw through Liu Ming's worries and reassured him with gentle laughter. "If it is just like that, I do not mind. Uncle Gu, I am sorry to bother you." Liu Ming set aside the worries he was carrying in his heart and agreed to their request. "Heh, this is just a small matter. In the days before I became a practitioner, I once held the title of the man with 100 faces," Gu Laosan boasted with a laugh. At this, he turned around and pulled out a number of vials from his massive bag, along with some small yet unnaturally sharp blades, and gestured for the youth to come over. After some hesitation, Liu Ming stood up and walked toward him. An hour later, in front of Liu Ming was a shiny bronze mirror that cast light upon his facial features. The eyebrows are slightly lighter and the hairs that were originally crooked have been fixed. A silver hairband has been added to the forehead, giving off an air of elegance. However, the biggest change is still. Liu Ming raised both his hands, which could originally be considered a rather healthy pair, and discovered that they had now become abnormally white, giving him the appearance of a pampered noble. "Take this vial of skin washer, apply it to your body once every night. I'll brew a few more bottles for you during our journey. By the time we reach the barbarian ghost sect, your skin color will remain as such for some time. By the time the color begins to fade, nobody will notice it anyway. Even without using this appearance-changing skill for so many years, looks like I am still pretty good at it." Gu Laosan remarked delightedly as he held the bronze mirror. Guo Laoda assessed the youth and gave his look of approval. The current Liu Ming definitely looked more suave than his previous self. As long as it was not a person who was closely acquainted with the young master of the Bai clan, the disguise would not be easily seen through. Even though Liu Ming had never met the young master, judging from the satisfied looks on both of their faces, he knew that the transformation was a success and inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. Now that he was in deep with these two men, his own life would also be in jeopardy if they were unable to scam their way through. "Ah, that's right, you are our master from now on, so please refrain from calling us uncle. Just address us as Guanda or Gu-san, just to prevent any slip-ups when we get there," Guan Laoda remarked. "I got it," Liu Ming replied with a heavy expression. One day later, a small yellow vessel could be seen traveling downstream. On this small boat, Gu Lao-san occasionally glanced into the cabin while holding onto the rudder with both hands. Within the cabin, Liu Ming was sitting cross-legged under the guidance of Guan Lao Da. In front of him was a small wooden table upon which the tiger's bite bracelet was placed. All of a sudden, Liu Ming let out a low cry and aimed a finger toward the bronze bracelet. Poof! The bracelet slightly trembled, after which it didn't move again. Liu Ming frowned at this sight. Not bad. To be able to form a reaction between your Yuanli and the tiger's bite bracelet within such a short time, seems like you are rather gifted in controlling practitioner weapons. The middle-aged man standing by the side was rather pleased, unlike Liu Ming's dissatisfaction. Did you not say that I only have 2 months to train? Liu Ming slowly asked. Young master may not know, but the tiger's bite bracelet is an upper-tier practitioner weapon and, by that virtue, should not be that easy to control. According to my knowledge, the Bai clan should have a secret technique, specific to controlling this practitioner weapon. Right now I only have normal techniques to pass to you and thus the affect is greatly lessened. Of course with your talent, 2 months should be more than enough for you to grasp the basics of manipulating this practitioner weapon, Guan Laoda explained to him. Since Guanda says it is so, there should be no problem. However, even after understanding the tiger's bite bracelet, there are still attack and defense techniques to be learned. I am afraid that those might take some time as well. Liu Ming responded. Young master need not worry. So long as you can master the art of control and are able to synchronize with the practitioner weapon to a certain degree, then everything else is a small matter of practice and familiarity. Guan Laoda replied without hesitation. So that is how it is. Then I will spend these few days focusing on my control. That's right, exactly what kind of a sect is the barbarian ghost sect? Guanda should have at least some knowledge of this area. Liu Ming suddenly thought of this and asked. If young master wishes to know about the barbarian ghost sect, this might be a slightly difficult request to accommodate. Although its ranking among the sects in the kingdom of Xian is closer to the bottom, if one is to talk merely about secrecy, then no other sect can come close the barbarian ghost sect in the way they so jealously guard their secrets. Guan Laoda said with an uneasy expression on his face. Oh? Why? Liu Ming was taken aback. This is because the barbarian ghost sect is a sect that specializes in manipulating ghosts. I have heard that the sect is built in a terrifying place where humans are unable to live and is surrounded by miasma all year round. As for the apostles and masters who practice the techniques of this sect, all of them have a strong connection with the river Styx and can thus summon and subdue ghosts to use against their foes. However, it is because of this that the participants for the barbarian ghost sect opening spirit ceremony are rather few and most capable practitioners instead opt to join other sects. Of course this is all just hearsay. Anything else regarding the sect I honestly cannot say for sure. Guan Laoda replied after thinking for a long while. Manipulating ghosts does indeed sound extremely terrifying. However, apart from the barbarian ghost sect, the other sects in the kingdom of Xian are. Liu Ming asked curiously. I am actually more familiar regarding the other sects. In the kingdom of Xian, apart from the barbarian ghost sect, there is the Heavenly Moon sect, the Hall of Blood, the Nine Enlightenment Mountain, and the Firestorm Way. These are the 4 biggest sections. Guan Laoda recited their names by heart. Oh, then what techniques do these sects specialize in? Liu Ming asked excitedly. The Heavenly Moon sect is a sect that specializes in wielding swords. It is said that the students under the sect can wield flying swords that can kill someone hundreds of meters away. The Hall of Blood is. At his request, Guan Laoda is starting describing the sects without withholding any information. Half a month later, a pitch-black carriage, drawn by 4 horses, was flying down an official road. Gu Lao-san was sitting peacefully in the coachman's seat without moving. Within the carriage, Liu Ming was seated cross-legged with his eyes firmly shut. Both of his hands rested on his knees while he was lightly breathing in a steady pattern. As he breathed, The bronze bracelet he wore on his arm continuously vibrated as it followed his breathing pattern. It was almost as if there was some form of resonance between the two of them. Guan Laodan nodded his head as he watched the scene from the opposite side of the carriage. To be honest, he originally thought that the youth's potential was average at best. He was instead treated to a surprise with the intensity in which the youth showed in the Yuanli manipulation exercises performed throughout their journey. Apart from the time spent sleeping, Liu Ming practically spent every available minute moving Yuanli throughout his body, searching for a feeling of resonance with the tiger's bite bracelet. Even during meal times, one could get a glimpse of the bracelet on his hand vibrating and producing light yellow glow. This form of training was extremely dry and boring and required the highest levels of concentration and discipline from the practitioner. No matter how insistent ordinary practitioners were, they would at most be able to keep this up for a few hours a day. Any longer than that and it would definitely take a toll on their spirit, causing them to be unable to focus. It would basically become a Sisyphean task. Unable to contain their curiosity, the two men asked Liu Ming how he accomplished such a feat. In the end, Liu Ming revealed to them his innate ability of being able to split his consciousness, which left them speechless. Now they realized how, without the supervision of a teacher, this youth managed to train himself to attain such a large amount of Yuanli. A month later, Guan Laoda and Gu Laosan were standing atop a knoll, attentively staring into the distance. Liu Ming was sitting hundreds of feet away from them with his eyes closed, while raising the arm on which the tiger's bite bracelet was worn. All of a sudden, he opened his eyes, flicked his wrist slightly, and called out, "Element shield." In an instant, the bracelet made a buzzing noise as it gave off a brilliant flash of light. A small round shield appeared and fixed itself to his forearm. The shield was glowing yellow and was apparently made entirely out of Yuanli. Finally, though it is the most basic of Yuanli defensive techniques, it is sufficient to say that you have already mastered the basics of using the tiger's bite bracelet. Originally I thought that it would take the young master at least 2 months to reach this stage. I never expected for you to reach it so quickly. Guan Laoda let out a sigh of relief while being unable to cover up his surprised expression. Me reaching this stage is all thanks to the patient efforts of the two of you. Now that I have this practitioner weapon to protect me, I can to a certain extent say that I am less worried about the opening spirit ceremony. Liu Ming cheerfully replied and, with the flick of his wrist, extinguished the shield. Chapter 8, Purple-Clothed Maiden. Young Master can now learn a couple of techniques, since Young Master has already mastered the art of manipulating Yuanli. However, if Young Master wants to quickly master these techniques, it is best to only pick 2 or 3 of them instead of many. After all, I can only teach you general techniques while the sect can offer you many more. Guan Laoda suggested. All right. Besides an attack technique, the remaining 2 techniques should be intended for protecting my life. How about Yuan Fortress Enlighten? Liu Ming had obviously considered this before and answered without any hesitation. Sure. You do not need to choose for the attack technique, as practitioner weapons usually have the same method of attacking. All you need to do is just concentrate the Yuanli within you and then have the practitioner weapon release it. Take my glove practitioner weapon for example. The attack that it emits is a Yuanli blob. Gu Laosan's practitioner weapon, which is a short sword, concentrates Yuanli into a light blade. As for Young Master's tiger's bite bracelet, I have not personally witnessed it in action. However, the power is definitely not low. I will teach you the methods later and you can slowly dissect them. If you have anything that you do not understand, the 2 of us will be here for you. Guan Laoda explained. When you fight with someone, no matter what technique you use with your practitioner weapon, you must record the number of times that you use a technique. We practitioners cannot compare to apostles as we have a very limited amount of Yuanli within our bodies. Every time we use our practitioner weapons, a huge cost is extracted on our bodies. Especially for Young Master who is a beginning practitioner. I am afraid that you can only use your practitioner weapon 3 or 4 times before you will run out of Yuanli. A practitioner without Yuanli is only slightly stronger than a normal person. Young master must remember that. Gu Lao-san reminded by the side. If it is like that, we practitioners don't need a second practitioner weapon. So strength is not determined by the number of practitioner weapons one has. Liu Ming was somewhat surprised. Normally it is like that. After all, beginner and middle-tier practitioners have very limited amounts of Yuanli. They wouldn't have much use for more practitioner weapons. However, for high-tier practitioners it is different. They have a lot more Yuanli, and with more practitioner weapons, they have more options. Which in turn leads to them being able to respond to attacks or attack in manner appropriate for the situation. However, no matter how many practitioner weapons one has, one can only use one at a time. I have heard that the spirit apostles and spirit masters have some kind of method that lets them use more than one practitioner weapon at a time, but the details aren't very clear to practitioners like me and Gu Lao-san. Guan Laoda said seriously. Thanks for the advice, I finally understand it a bit more. I will be more careful about these things next time. Liu Ming said seriously as he cupped his hands. 2 months later, on the winding path of a very dark and daunting mountain, Liu Ming's group was slowly climbing bit by bit. This mountain path was abnormally dangerous with bottomless cliffs and precipices on 2 sides. The path was also very narrow, and only one person could pass at a time. Furthermore, the rock steps of stairs were covered with green moss due to no one walking on it for years, which made the path even more slippery. If the 3 were not practitioners, who were much more agile than normal people, they would have fallen down the cliffs by the side long ago. Even like this, Guan Laoda and Gu Lao-san walked with utmost caution while sweat poured down their backs. However, the young man between the 2 stayed calm, as if he couldn't see the dangers in front of him. While being surprised by the youth's lack of response, Guan Laoda and Gu Lao-san began to respect his courage. To Liu Ming, the danger in climbing this mountain was nothing compared to the dangers he experienced on Savage Island. After climbing for 4 hours, the 3 of them finally reached the top of the huge mountain. All 3 were dumbstruck after they had looked around. The top of the mountain was a huge field, quite a few acres large, but not even the shadow of a single human could be found. Guanda, this is right place, the place the sect designated for us to come to, right? Liu Ming asked as he furrowed his brows. Young master, this is an extremely important matter. How could I not remember where to go? Maybe the envoy hasn't arrived yet. Guan Laoda wiped the sweat off of his forehead and bitterly responded. How long is it until the deadline the sect set? Liu Ming thought about it for a second before asking again. About 2 days. This time, it was Gu Lao-san who answered. Since we still have time, let's wait here for a while. Liu Ming looked around before making a decision. The him now was completely immersed in the character of young Master Bai. Guan Laoda and Gu Lao-san naturally agreed. Thus, the 3 of them found a clean rock and started to rest on it. Time went by little and soon, it was noon with the sun up high. At this time, sounds of footsteps came from the other side of the mountain. The resting Liu Ming and group quickly opened their eyes and looked in that direction. Quickly, 5 people came out from another path that led to the top of the mountain. There were 2 middle-aged men, 1 elderly man, and 1 middle-aged woman who all crowded around a girl dressed in purple. The 2 middle-aged men wore colorful clothes and both had knives at their waist. The elder had a green robe and was somewhat skinny. His eyes seemed to be eternally narrowed, and he had a goatee. The middle-aged woman looked normal, but her skin was whiter than normal. She was dressed in green servant clothes. The purple-clothed maiden looked to be about 11 or 12. She looked extremely cute with a jade-like carved face and 2 pitch-black eyes. Whenever she looked around, a sense of eccentricity was conveyed. When the 5 people saw that there was already someone at the top of the mountain, they paused for a second. After examining Liu Ming and his group for a few seconds, the elder whispered something to his group. Thus, the five led the girl to the other side of the space and found a few rocks to rest on as well. They were almost directly across from Liu Ming and his group. Seeing this, Liu Ming had a hint of doubt and turned his head and used a gaze to question Guan Laoda and Gu Lao-san. "Young master need not worry. They are not from the barbarian ghost sect. They are probably other participants in the ceremony and are waiting for the sect's envoy just like us. He, looks like we found the right place." Guan Laoda explained and smiled. "That's why. So that means that someone else will come." Liu Ming looked like he was pondering a serious matter. "I cannot say for sure. It depends on whether the nearby practitioner families are willing to take out enough resources to buy a spot for their kids to go to the ceremony." Guan Laoda answered. Liu Ming nodded and closed his eyes to rest again. Although Liu Ming looked like he was resting, in reality, the Yuanli within him was orbiting under some special rhythm. At the same time, the Yuanli resonated with the tiger's bite bracelet, making it lightly pulse. However, this all was covered by Liu Ming's robe and thus no one could see what he was doing. Not long after, one of the middle-aged men stood up and walked toward Liu Ming's group. Seeing this, Guan Laoda and Gu Lao-san's eyes sparkled, feelings of caution were etched onto their faces. Liu Ming also seemed to have sensed something and opened his eyes. "I am Guanglin City's Mu clan's member, Tai Yun. I am here to greet you by my lady Ming Zhu's orders. You three are." The middle-aged man did not come too close and stopped about 7 to 8 meters away from the three. "So it is the famous Mu clan. I am Mu City's Bai clan's guest, Guanda. This is my young master Bai Chong Tian." Guan Laoda became serious as he quickly stood to return the greeting. "Ah, so it is the Bai clan's young master. Our two clans have quite a good relationship, why not come over and sit with us?" The man was initially taken aback before he reacted with a smile. Our young master does not feel well, so we will not bother Lady Mingzhu." After hesitating, Guan Laoda respectfully declined. "Oh, that is quite regretful. Then we can only wait until our young masters are accepted into the sect before they interact." The middle-aged man showed some surprise and looked deeply at Liu Ming. However, he did not insist and, after cupping his hands, he turned around. "Guanlin, the Mu clan, is it powerful, famous?" After the middle-aged man left, Liu Ming turned around to ask. "Famous would be an understatement. The Mu clan is the strongest practitioner family in the entire Daxian. Although the Mu clan and the Bai clan look to be about the same, it would probably take 3 or 4 Bai clans to be equal to a single Mu clan. I have heard that the Mu clan has at least 4 spirit apostles in various sections." Gu Lao-san seemed to be quite fearful of the Mu clan. "So it is like that. However, why does he want me to go over there? Would he be able to see through our deception?" Liu Ming continued to ask. "I do not think so. Although, the Bai clan and the Mu clan had a period of communication when our previous family head was still alive, our two clans have not had much of a relationship ever since the new family head took control. These people have at most heard your name but have never met you in person." Guan Laoda said confidently. Gu Lao-san to the side also nodded his head in agreement. Seeing this, Liu Ming relaxed his worries. At the same time, among the Mu clan members, the girl named Mu Mingzhu showed a peculiar expression when she heard the middle-aged man's report. "Uncle Tai, I did not think that they would be from the Bai clan. I think I heard the name Bai Chongtian from my father before, but I do not have a deep impression of him. Third uncle, do you know this Bai clan young master?" The girl turned her head and asked the skinny elder beside her. "Bai Chongtian. Bai clan does have such a young master. He should be the unrecognized son of their family head that now has the title of adopted son." Hearing the girl, the skinny elder smiled and slowly told her what he knew. Although his words were slow and careless, he exposed a secret that the family head of the Bai clan had been desperately hiding. "The Bai clan's family head owes my aunt a lot. That action of his is not too out of character. However, the Bai clan's family head must really value his adopted son. To the point where he even convinced the other members of his clan to send Bai Chongtian to the opening ceremony. The girl said with a hint of arrogance. Chapter 9, Receiving the Envoy. Regardless of what the Bai clan's head did, since he had them deliver the young master here, I reckon that they intend to stake everything on this one throw. From what I know, the Bai clan's strength has declined quite a bit since their peak, and taking out this amount of resources is a major strain for them. I guess they have no other choice, since in the entire Bai clan, only Bai Yan Er became a spirit apostle. In fact, there aren't that many Bai clan members that survive the various opening spirit ceremonies either. This Bai Chongtian should be carrying the hopes of the Bai clan. The elder faintly said. The reason as to why the Bai clan chose the barbarian ghost sect, which is ranked the lowest among the largest sects in Daxian, is because of how little the sect requires for other people to join in their opening spirit ceremony. If not for Ant Yun being in the barbarian ghost sect, I would never have come to this section. I do not like how the barbarian ghost sect deals in demons and ghosts. Mu Mingzu pouted her lips. Humph, how many times have I told you? The opening spirit ceremony is extremely dangerous, and even though you have displayed decent talent in training, it is not set in stone until you pass the opening spirit ceremony. Your Aunt Yun should have a position in the opening spirit ceremony, though she cannot help you much, she can still save your life should you fail. Or else, our Mu clan would have sent you to a better sect than this, as we do not lack the resources. The green-robed elder responded with a solemn face. Yes, Zhu Er understands she is wrong. Seeing that the elder was becoming angry, the purple-dressed young girl immediately dropped her face, not daring to say another word. Even though the Bai clan and us of the Mu clan have had a little uneasiness because of your aunt, our two clans are still much closer compared to other clans. We have always exchanged gifts at events and never skipped out on any of them. In addition, for Bai Chongtian to be able to come to this opening spirit ceremony, his talent is probably quite good. Try to get close to him before the ceremony, and if he really does pass the opening spirit ceremony, the Bai clan and the Mu clan could go back to the old days. Although your aunt's matter is a little saddening, we still have to think of the big picture. The green-robed elder slowly spoke. Even though Mu Mingzu did not want to do anything like that, she could only nod her head like a chicken pecking for rice. This third uncle was a top-tier practitioner and was only second to the clan head in the Mu clan. Unless she became a spirit apostle, she would have to listen to him. However, Mingzu was instinctively annoyed by Bai Chongtian because of this uncle's speech. Liu Ming, who was still resting and training his Yuanli, didn't realize what had just happened. Even if he had the talent to do two things at once, his time for training was a little low. Thus, if he wanted to become better, it was not going to be easy at all. Like this, with the two sides not bothering each other, they stayed at the top of the mountain for an entire day. On the second day, two more people came up from the path the Mu clan group first appeared from. This time it was an old man and a young man. The old man had a grey robe with creases all over his face, and in his hand was a smoke stick. The young man looked to be about as old as Liu Ming and wore a brand new blue robe. His skin was slightly dark and he looked extremely honest. When the young man saw that there were already people on the mountain peak, he paused for a second. The grey-robed old man wasn't surprised at all by the situation, and after calling out to the young man, he found them a place to sit. Are they also from a practitioner clan? Seeing this, Liu Ming couldn't help but ask his companions. It does not look like they are. They are probably loose practitioners. After appraising the two, Guan Laodai concluded. Huh? Wasn't the opening spirit ceremony only applicable to members in practitioner clans? Liu Ming asked, surprised. It is not specifically open just to members of practitioner clans, but normally, only practitioner clans can afford to have their children sent to these expensive ceremonies. However, if loose practitioners are able to pay just as much, the sects have no reason to decline their resources. Although these occurrences are very rare, when they do occur, the sects will pay quite a bit of attention to these loose practitioners. It is said that the chances of these practitioners passing the opening spirit ceremony is even higher than the chance of practitioners that were trained by the section. Guan Laoda said quite seriously. Oh, why is that? Liu Ming was still quite confused. If buying a spot is quite straining for practitioner clan. For loose practitioners, this spot is equal to the work of a couple or even tens of generations. If the kid is not extremely talented and has a 30 to 40% chance of passing the ceremony, they would not take the gamble. This time, it was Gu Lao-san who answered. So, he has at least a 1/3 chance of becoming a spirit apostle? After hearing that, Liu Ming was quite surprised. However, when he tilted his head to look at the tall young man, he could find no peculiarities. Even though there usually are loose practitioners that come to these opening spirit ceremonies, their numbers are definitely low. Since young master is going to be in the same sect as this young man, it would be a good idea to familiarize yourself with him. There will definitely be benefits if you do that. Guan Laoda hesitated before he added the final part. I know what to do. Liu Ming stared at the tall young man deeply once more before closing his eyes again. On the other side, the Mu clan's third uncle had also realized the status of the newcomers and also explained the situation to the purple-dressed maiden. However, they did not go up to give a greeting. Under this awkward atmosphere, the three groups of people patiently waited. After another day and night passed, and when the rays just peeked over the clouds, a buzzing noise sounded. At first, it was as soft as a whisper, but soon it became thundering. The three groups, which were still resting, immediately stood up and looked in the direction where the noise was coming from. In the sky, a black cloud quickly flew toward the mountain. It is the envoy. After this, us two can no longer be together with you, but I have told you everything about the Bai clan and common knowledge among practitioners. Do not make any mistakes. As long as you join the envoy, you will be fine. Guan Laoda quickly reminded Liu Ming. Even though Guan Laoda did not show it, his heart was pounding rapidly. In Gu Lao-san's eyes, a strange light flashed. However, since the two of them weren't normal people, their faces were as blank as could be when the black cloud neared the mountain. When the black cloud was directly atop the mountain, the buzzing sound suddenly stopped. In place of it was the cold voice of a man. Those that are here for opening spirit ceremony, come up with your verification sills. Once I finish examining them, I still have to go to other places. When his voice faded, the black cloud violently rumbled before a cloud ladder extended down toward the center of the mountain peak. Verification sill. When Liu Ming heard those words, he slightly paused, but before he could ask anything, Guan Laoda shoved something into his hand while smiling. Please be carefully, young master. All you have to do is give the sill to the leader of the envoy. After going through a couple of thoughts, Liu Ming didn't say anything and walked toward the cloud ladder. In the other two groups, Mu Mingzhu and the tall young man also nervously went toward the cloud ladder after hearing the final parting words from their respective guardians. Moments later, the three of them got to the cloud ladder at the same time and, after pausing, looked at each other. Hurry up. If we miss the timing, I will cancel your qualifications to open your spirits. The man on the black cloud was already becoming somewhat impatient. At this declaration, Mu Mingzhu and the tall young man jumped up in shock and fear. No longer daring to tarry any further, they hastily rushed up the ladder toward the black cloud. Liu Ming smiled before likewise lifting his foot to move. The ladder looked like curled up fog, but when stepped on, it possessed a force that supported the body, making one feel as if one was stepping on real ground. In his heart, Liu Mu felt mystified at this. Yet, he did not dare tarry as he followed behind the other two as they ascended toward the sky. A short period of effort later, Mu Mingzhu, who was at the front, finally reached the underside of the black cloud. As she looked toward the surging black gas in front of her, she grit her teeth and dashed in. The tall and well-built youth who was right behind momentarily hesitated for a bit before putting on a brave front and walked in. Though, his movements were clearly more rigid than before. Behind them, Liu Ming had witnessed the actions of the two. However, he had no hesitation and with one swift movement, entered into the black fog. The instant his body made contact with the black cloud, he felt slightly cold. However, when the light once again shone into his eyes, he had actually reached an immensely huge square platform. The entire platform was about 1 acre large and shaded entirely in white. On its edges, more than 10 strange sculptures were erected which were covered in dazzling white light. In the middle of the platform, about 100 youths stood in twos and threes, all of who were currently sizing up the 3 who had just entered with curious gazes. Something occurred to Liu Ming as he lifted his head to look up. All he saw was an ash-colored cloud quietly floating 7 or 8 meters above. Atop the cloud, a black-clothed middle-aged man sat cross-legged. The man had some pockmarks on his face, but his 2 eyes flickered as he coldly stared at the trio. "Are there only the 3 of you? Whatever. Take out your sills and announce your names, I am going to inspect your identities." Chapter 10, Lei Zhen. "Yes, Spirit Master. I am Liu Ming from the Mu clan in Guanlin. This is my verification sill." Liu Ming quickly took out a black metal sill and held it out with both of her hands. "Oh. You are a clansman of Sister Mu. Anyhow, I am not a spirit master, I am only a spirit apostle. A spirit master would not show his face to mortals that have not even awakened their spiritual see." The man's cold expression loosened as he said this and waved his hand a little. Whoosh! The metal plate that the girl in purple held shot into the air before firmly landing in the man's hands. The escort then formed a one-handed sign, and with black light floating on his finger, pointed at the sill. With a popping noise, the metal plate slightly shook before it expelled a misty white light mirror. Within the light mirror, another girl in purple appeared. Besides the difference in clothing, her facial demeanor was very similar. Perhaps the one in the light mirror was slightly younger. "Yes, this is you without a doubt. You can go stand over there." The man glanced over to the side and nodded his head. When Liu Ming heard this, she happily agreed and headed over to the middle of the platform in a pleased manner. I am Gao Chong. It's a pleasure to meet the emissary." The tall young man also took out a similar metal sill from his chest and, nervously, held it up high. "Gao Chong. You are one of the 3 loose practitioners in this awakening ceremony. Not bad, maybe you will become a fellow disciple. Let me see your verification sill." Amazingly, the man in black squeezed out a smile and spoke in a very polite tone. With the same hand, he cast the spell again. Naturally, Gao Chong passed without any problems. "Bai clans Bai Chong Tian. Please inspect my verification sill." Liu Ming took a deep breath and lifted up the item in his hands. Even though he was very nervous on the inside, no abnormalities could be seen from the outside. This time, the man casually swept his eyes over Liu Ming before quietly taking the sill. The same white light came out of the sill and another Bai Chong Tian came out in a lifelike manner. Liu Ming glanced at the white light and his heart skipped. The Bai Chong Tian in the white light looked almost 80 to 90% similar to him. Though, at the time, he was wearing a white shirt and had an arrogant look. This and a few other points were a little different from Liu Ming. Huh. The man inspected the Bai Chong Tian in the image a few times and looked down at Liu Ming. His face showing an expression of surprise. Liu Ming's heart sank and the bronze bracelet on his arm started to shake a little. However, he remained still. In this 1 year, you have changed quite a bit. Looks like you have made quite a bit of preparation for the awakening ceremony. That previous impetuous aura seems to have completely disappeared." The man slowly said. Liu Ming heard this and let loose a sigh of relief in his heart. He quickly bowed and replied, I know that my talent is mediocre, so I could only work hard in order to gain a slight chance in the awakening. Haha. Awakening the spiritual sea is not something that hard work can help you through. Whatever, telling you this stuff now is useless. Later on you will naturally know more about this. Find a place to sit down, we will be going to the next location. The man lightly chuckled but did not say much else beside telling him to sit. The other youths heard this and sat down cross-legged. Seeing this, Liu Ming and the other two also found a place to sit down on the platform. It was unknown if it was due to them being escorted from the same place, but the trio did not separate to sit with other people. Though the trio looked at each other, nobody said a thing. At this time, the man in the air flipped his hand and took out a white disc. With a flash, it flew into the air and disappeared into the clouds. The next moment, the surrounding statues let out a buzzing sound before starting to emit soft lights. Then, with a loud noise, the platform started to move toward a direction with large inertia. Many young men and women, who did not sit tightly, fell over. The girl in purple, who was in front of Liu Ming, was also unprepared and her delicate body twisted and started to fall. Luckily, the tall, young man to her side had good reflexes and quickly grabbed onto the girl's arm and steadily pulled her back. Thank you, Brother Gao. Mu Mingzhu steadily sat down again and with a flush spoke to the tall young man. It is nothing. It is just a small matter. When Gao Chong saw the girl's response, he had a bit of a helpless look. After the girl in purple gave a smile to Gao Chong, she turned toward Liu Ming and gave him a glare. Liu Ming only gave her a faint smile that didn't look like a smile. He sat steadily from the beginning and could obviously have given the young girl a hand. However, he had no intentions of doing so. Due to this, Mu Mingzhu's impression of him had worsened. However, at this time, Liu Ming's gaze shifted from the two and onto a white statue near him. The statue was very strange. It was like a monkey yet not a monkey, like a bat yet not a bat. It was as if it was a monkey that had a pair of bat wings growing out of it. Due to this, the statue looked extremely ferocious, making others feel a chill in their hearts as they looked at it. Humph. A small clan really is a small clan. You actually do not even know about night crawlers, one of the most basic type of ghosts. Mu Mingzhu said in a sarcastic tone as she scoffed. Oh, Miss Mu knows what this is. Liu Ming asked curiously. Next to him, Gao Chong had also widened eyes. At first, Mu Mingzhu didn't want to talk to Liu Ming any further, but seeing Gao Chong's expression, she once again remembered what her third uncle had said. With a thought, she put on a smile and said, since Brother Gao wishes to know, I will share a bit of my small knowledge. Night crawlers are also called Yucha ghosts and are the most common of the 108 ghosts in the 100 ghost diagram. Besides being able to fly, they do not really have any special powers. Mu Mingzhu was worthy of being a daughter of the Mu family. Even though she was not a part of the barbarian ghost sect yet, she still knew a lot about ghosts. Not only did she explain every detail about the night crawlers, she also spoke about the other statues of ghosts nearby. This attracted many other young men and women over. Ha! What's the point of understanding these low soldier rank ghosts? Once we really join the sect, you will have to at least tame a general rank ghost to not waste learning the art of exorcism. A tall, brown-haired teenager sneered to the side. You talk pretty big. According to what I know, even among the spirit apostles within the sect over half of them are only able to tame soldier rank ghosts. Only a small number of disciples are able to tame a captain rank ghost. As for general rank ghosts, even among spirit masters, only a few are able to tame them. Mu Mingzhu looked at the brown-haired teenager, and responded without reservation. Even if others cannot do it, that does not mean that I, Lei Zhen, cannot do it. The brown-haired teenager said with a smile. Lei Zhen? You are from the Lei clan. Mu Mingzu heard the name of the teenager and the color on her face changed. The others around also sucked down a cold breath as they heard his name, their eyes displayed a trace of fear. Although, the Bai clan can be said to be a first-rate family in their area, the Lei clan ranked within the top 3 in the entire Daxian country. The clan had dozens of spirit apostles, and even a spirit master. Even if you are from the Lei family, this type of speech should wait for after the awakening ceremony. Mu Mingzu was secretly surprised but still held onto her pride. She was reluctant to lose face for her family. However, this time, Lei Zhen did not say any more. He glanced at the tall teenager next to the girl and left with a laugh. From beginning to end, he did not even glance at Liu Ming. Liu Ming sat on the ground without moving and turned a blind eye to everything in general. On Savage Island, the more hidden one was, the better. Since this was the only way to survive a bit longer. Those with a lot of strength who entered into the spotlight, generally wouldn't live past a year. Although the outside world was different from Savage Island, Liu Ming did not try to change this aspect of himself. At this time, one could clearly see that Mu Mingzu and Gao Chong were close, speaking warmly to each other. Every now and then, a small giggling sound could be heard. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, they completely excluded Liu Ming. However, Liu Ming did not care at all and once again focused his mind. He once more started training right there. In the remaining 7 to 8 days, the platform would stop every half a day, picking up around 3 to 10 of youths each time. Once the platform held around 300 to 400 people and could not hold any more, the man in black stopped picking up youths. He then directed the black cloud to return to the section. Half a month later, the giant black cloud flew over many rolling mountains and went straight into the depths of a dark forest. In one breath, they went over 100 miles, and appeared in front of a mountain range with over a dozen mountains. On the other side of the sky came a rumbling noise and another black cloud came toward the same mountain range. After a while, the two black clouds both arrived at the mountain range and landed on the side of one of the mountains. Go down. The gate of the sect is here. The man in black suddenly ordered as he appeared in midair. As the platform firmly landed on the ground, the black cloud and light disappeared. Many of the young boys and girls excitedly jumped off the platform. Liu Ming stopped at the edge of the platform and carefully looked around at his new surroundings. Part 1 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.